2733 Vermont Route 133. Horrible things happened here.
We're aching from this horrible tragedy.
It's a horrific scene. Extensive bodily damages. Blood spatter everywhere.
When he met with police, his clothes were covered in blood.
She didn't feel safe in their home, and she was afraid to be alone with him.
This crime is absolutely awful, shocking. He meets up with police, and he's covered in blood.
A crime of passion. This is an assassination of three people.
Erica Paluziak Crossman was also found inside, naked and dead from being shot in the head. The couple only married for under 3 months.
What's your emergency?
There's somebody shot on my front steps, but yeah, I think she's dying or dead. I don't really want to touch her.
At around 5 p.m. on September 13th, 2024, a 22-year-old man by the name of Brian Crossman Jr. arrived at his father's home in Powlett, Vermont, while his mother, Crystal Bassett, and her husband, his stepfather, Ernest Bassett Jr., traveled to Buffalo, New York for the weekend.
Police interviews with Crossman's grandmother revealed that he was only staying at the house for the weekend. He lives in Granville.
Prior to that, Brian had not spent time with his father for a couple years, as they didn't have the best relationship due to his mental health condition, which caused him to be at odds with his father. His mother recalls at approximately 3 years old, she began noticing his mental issues, but as he aged, it escalated to the point where Brian was erratic and aggressive, and at other times talked to himself in a way to suggest he was having a conversation with himself in his own mind. His sister describes him as being extremely concerning, with extreme forms of aggression toward others. She recalls his infatuation with torturing frogs and kittens in the past. Upon picking up his son and bringing him back to his residence, a close friend of Crossman Sr. named Taylor was already there doing some landscaping when he noticed Brian acting strangely. According to Taylor, Brian was tipping his head sideways and laughing, and had a look in his eyes that looked right through you. In that moment, Taylor's mind wandered to a disturbing memory from 3 years prior. He, Crossman Sr. and Brian were out in the woods together. They left Brian in his truck to go and fill feeders, but upon their return, Brian had found and loaded Taylor's gun and pointed it toward them. When Taylor tried to tell him the dangers of pointing a firearm at others, Brian muttered the words, "One of these days, I'm going to kill him." Taylor, caught off guard by what he was hearing, inquired further into his statement. Taylor asked, "Kill who?" Brian casually replied, "My father." 41-year-old Erica, Brian's stepmother and newly married wife of his father, grew concerned for her safety at Brian's arrival, which should have been a clear indication that his presence would turn into something catastrophic. At the residence with Crossman Sr. and Erica was her son, 13-year-old Colin Taft, nicknamed Tex. Erica confided in Taylor that she was afraid to be alone at the home with Brian, going as far as saying she had a pistol. This wasn't just an uneasy feeling. This was fear, to the point of preparing to shoot her stepson if her life was in danger. Crossman Sr. was a lineman for Green Mountain Power, and he was on call that weekend, so he could be called out leaving her alone with Brian.
During interviews with family members and close friends, a friend of Crossman Sr.'s said that Erica Crossman told him days before the murder that she didn't feel safe with Crossman Jr. in their home, and she was afraid to be alone with him.
Taylor, thinking of everyone's safety, told Erica to have her husband lock up all the guns. With precautions set, nothing bad could go wrong for just one weekend, or so they thought. Crossman Sr.'s mother, Carla Crossman, saw her son Erica and Tex on Saturday, September 14th, around 9:30 p.m. Unbeknownst to her, that would be the last time, at least, the last time breathing. On September 15th, at approximately 3:52 a.m., Brian contacted the Vermont State Police and reported he located 3 family members with apparent gunshot wounds in their home. He went on to state he observed several shotguns on the floor of the residence, covered in blood.
The Rutland County State's Attorney's Office says before 4 a.m. on September 15th, Brian Crossman Jr. called police to tell them he found his father, stepmother, and stepbrother shot to death inside their home. Court records show that police met the junior Crossman at a nearby school, finding him with blood-like stains on his clothes.
This is a small town of around 1,400 people, so authorities were startled by the 911 call and acted swiftly to meet Brian at an agreed location, Wells Village School. Around the same time, they received a separate call from a concerned passerby about someone covered in blood on the side of the road.
There was a report of a person that had some blood on them that they saw on the roadway.
According to the Vermont State Police, they received a call early Sunday morning of a suspicious person on the side of the road.
Brian was that someone, and while police were on their way to the school, he took the time to message his family. At around 4:19 a.m., he messaged his sister, Rachel, that he loved her. Around the same time, he messaged his Aunt Julie the same, then told her he's not doing well, and she can't help fix this, and Dad is dead. The police arrived and began questioning Brian. The first thing they noticed was a shocking sight. Brian appeared to be covered in red-brown stains that appeared like blood from head to toe. A short while after, around 4:35 a.m., he messaged his mother Crystal that something bad had happened, that he loved her, and that she would eventually hear about what happened later, as he's now being questioned by law enforcement. Brian told police he had gone for a walk at night as he usually does. He did not know what time he left, but it was dark and he was gone for a few hours. He stated his father owns a large amount of property and he had been walking on it looking at deer. When he returned, he found his father, stepmother, and stepbrother deceased. He stated that he attempted to get his father into a side-by-side and drive him to his grandmother's house across the street to notify her. He told police he changed his mind about this and only dragged his father outside. He advised he attempted to call 911 several times, but was unable to. He then stated he had changed his clothing and there was additional bloody clothing at the residence. Brian concluded his story by insinuating walking at midnight was something he frequently did, telling police, "I like to put my headphones on, walk around town, and just listen to music and podcasts."
It's an unusual circumstance that you don't get the caller to actually meet up with the police, and he meets him up. He's covered top from shirt down to his pants in blood. And then he's telling about his parents being, his dad dying. So now you're like, what's going on? So the cops responded to the scene were very smart. Having the body camera on is one of the best things the officers on scene could have done when they met up with the subject in this case at this point.
Given the grotesque nature of the crime, you'd think a son would be traumatized, but Brian seemed rather nonchalant after finding his family murdered. Crime scene investigators turned their attention to the residence. Upon their arrival, they located a deceased Crossman Sr. lying on his back directly in front of the mudroom entrance door, with a gunshot injury to his head and other gunshot injuries to his body. They found the alleged vehicle which Brian claimed he tried to transfer his father into, and there was a large amount of blood stain located on the vehicle tailgate, driver's side floorboard, and steering wheel. The crime scene search team located a camouflage shotgun lying in the grass near the chicken coop. They found Erica's deceased body on the right side of the master bedroom bed in a supine position. She was completely nude, and her legs were spread apart. Her head was positioned facing to her left side and appeared to have a gunshot wound to the left side of her head. This raised questions of whether something vulgar happened to her before she was murdered. In the upstairs spare bedroom where Brian stayed, a grey woman's bra and a woman's one-piece bathing suit were located in the second drawer of the dresser. The bra size was the same as the bras found downstairs, belonging to Erica. No other clothing was located inside this dresser. Making their way to her son's bedroom, he was found on the floor on the east side of the bed. He was lying face down, slightly on his left side. He appeared to have a gunshot wound to his right calf, and also another gunshot wound to the head. Numerous shotgun shells were scattered around his body. Throughout the house, firearms, ammunition, and spent shells lay all about as if it were a battlefield. Upon investigating the different rooms of the property, the amount of blood pools, stains, and droplets they found was as if someone was painting the house red. It was a massacre. This wasn't any ordinary crime scene, but one whose aftermath was a result of a murderer who set out to do carnage in the most sadistic way.
It's a bloody scene. To realize it, and I don't think people realize the amount of blood at crime scenes at times, especially you have 3 people being shot, shotgun causing extensive bodily damages, and blood spatter everywhere and blood flowing everywhere. It's a horrific scene.
The medical examiner listed Crossman Sr.'s cause of death as gunshot wounds of the head and chest, Erica's cause of death as a gunshot wound to the head, and her son's cause of death as multiple gunshot wounds. Their deaths were ruled a homicide.
What's the defense of shooting a kid in his bedroom, a woman that you liked in her room, I mean, naked, and pretty much shot her in the head? The kid was shot in the leg, and I believe he was also shot in the head. So he was trying to run. The reality is the actions he did is highly criminal. It took time and effort to do this.
How did the suspect get a hold of that much firepower to carry out the deed? Recall Taylor advised them to lock the firearms away. Upon investigating the gun room on the property, the crime search team found the answer. The cabinet where the firearms were stored shows signs of being broken into, with numerous weapons missing. While law enforcement was conducting investigations, Brian was conveyed to the Glens Falls Hospital and admitted to the mental health unit. Officer Samantha McConnell, who assisted in getting Brian admitted, recalled his demeanor even then remained unbothered and was more upset about the long wait time at the hospital. The tight-knit community was weighed down by grief. Investigators knew they had to act quickly to bring justice.
News of their death sent shockwaves across the community.
We're aching from this horrible tragedy.
Thank you.
Brian was on the select board. Many people knew him, cared about him and his family. To say he's going to be missed is an understatement. We are a small town, and we all affect each other, and anything that happens to any of us affects all of us.
It's very hard to comprehend. It just hasn't sunk in.
This little town is so quiet, it's beautiful, the people are so comfortable. So bad news is so bad for the town.
And adds that he's concerned for everyone's well-being.
I'm worried for this situation. I'm worried for my neighbor.
When plot holes began forming in Brian's story given to cops, one person began looking like the likely suspect of the heinous crime. Firstly, while canvassing the crime scene, they found a set of black Beats headphones in Brian's room. This contradicted his original statements about going for a walk with his headphones on, because traces of blood would have been on the headphones if that were the case. But both the headphones and the room the headphones were in showed no traces of red-brown stains like other parts of the house. This means the headphones never left that room that night. Not to mention, detectives interviewed his mother, and she stated that Brian isn't known for taking walks late at night like he claimed to always do. In fact, she said he's normally in bed by 10 p.m. When interviewing his grandmother, her shocking admittance to what detectives asked was telling of the nature of Brian.
In an interview with police, the suspect's grandmother said that Crossman Jr. was visiting just for the weekend. She also told them that the father and son had a troubled relationship due to Crossman Jr.'s mental health and learning disabilities. She says that she believes he could be capable of committing the act and that he was very proficient with firearms.
The cracks in his story began to shatter his alibi, but it was the confiscation and analysis of his cell phone and social media that exposed the lies behind Brian's initial statements to police. Data on the cell phone showed that Brian made multiple internet searches related to serial killers and unresolved murders. Digging deeper into the data, it showed that Brian made a Facebook Messenger call to his father at 12:21 a.m. on September 15th. At that time, the company truck's GPS showed his father was at work, before leaving 7 minutes after that call at 12:28 a.m. He arrived home at 12:47 a.m. This is significant because Brian's cell phone data showed a gap in use between 12:30 a.m. to 1:33 a.m., immediately after the call with his father. For Brian to be able to make a Facebook Messenger call, he needed to be connected to a Wi-Fi network signal or in cell coverage area. This contradicted Brian's initial statements to police about not having cell phone service to call 911 when he first found his family murdered, so he drove to Wells School to make the call. The data indicated Brian was within Wi-Fi range when he called his father earlier. Turning their attention to Brian's clothes he initially had on at the crime scene, detectives found the same ammunition for the shotgun that murdered his father in his pants pockets. With the seizure of Brian's clothing for analysis, it revealed more damning evidence. In investigating the crime scene, bloody footprints were layered throughout the house. These footprints were matched to the same tread pattern found beneath Brian's bloody shoes. Authorities then turned their attention to a red mark along the shoulder and neck of Brian. The reason for this was that it was consistent with a mark in the direct location where a shooter commonly places the butt of a long gun to fire it. One weapon that falls under that category is one of the murder weapons. Affidavit documents detail a conversation between Brian and his mother while at the hospital. Brian asked his mother if he had an injury to his shoulder and neck. With the surmounting evidence against him, the spotlight was on Brian as the suspect in the brutal murders.
Investigators say the home was covered in blood, firearms, and shell casings, and that Crossman Jr.'s story was inconsistent.
Crossman Jr. saying he located his family dead inside. Crossman Jr. saying he had gotten blood all over his shirt from dragging his father, who had died, outside the residence. Police able to confirm through their investigation that this was not true. Police say that Crossman Jr. was the murderer and had not just found his family dead, as he had shot and killed them.
New York State Police arrested Brian on September 20th as he was getting discharged from the Glens Falls Hospital. He was charged with 3 counts of felony aggravated murder for his father, stepmother, and stepbrother, and held without bail while facing extradition back to Vermont. Brian has since pleaded not guilty and is awaiting trial behind bars. If convicted, he faces the possibility of life in prison without parole.
This is a matter of the People's State of New York against Brian Crossman Jr.
Brian Crossman appearing in a New York courtroom.
Mr. Crossman, you are charged with being a fugitive from justice from the state of Vermont.
Prosecutors charged Crossman Jr. with 3 counts of aggravated murder, the most severe charge under Vermont law. If convicted, it carries the penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And it is, I believe, by the legislator designed to capture the most horrific homicides.
Crossman Sr. was recently appointed as a political figure for the town. He was loved along with his wife and stepson. May they rest in peace and justice be served for the brutality that stole their lives. For more true crime documentaries, check out one of the videos on the screen. This has been an episode of Mysteries, where true stories from around the world come to life. What stories come next? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to never miss what intriguing chronicles will be told.